Is it me or is it you?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. I can hear you now.
Sweet. I'm sorry. I didn't have my ears in. I just had them sitting in front of me and then I was like, why can't I hear her? Oh, yeah. Headphones. Gotcha. Hi. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing amazing and I'm so happy that you said yes to this and that you're able to lend me your time.
Oh,
So let's dive in.
should I get my headphones? Will that make the sound better?
You sound great on my end.
Okay, perfect. Well,
Yeah,
that's great then.
cool, cool. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the 2 Degrees podcast brought to you by the Play On Foundation. Today's guest I am so thrilled to bring to you because amongst all of the artists that I've had on the show so far, as incredible as they all are in their own right, the thing that sets this guest apart is her theater company. She's just as amazing and she's just as skilled of an artist as everybody else. But the fact that she has a theater company still blows me out of the water. But everybody, it's Ruth Goodwin. Good
Hello.
morning. Good afternoon, actually. How's the day so far?
Day so far is full of grant applications and frustration, but I am thrilled to take a break from that and be talking to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I've tried to delve into that world. I guess let's start there. Where did you start, or where did you learn grant writing?
Oh my gosh. I have no idea. I just sort of went for it. No, that's not true. When I started applying for grants, a few people that had told me, a few people with experience I had just like reached out to, they were like, the grant writing process specifically, often generally, but like in Canada, we're really asking from three granting bodies. You're asking for um, provincial, federal, and municipal funding, and the grants are really, they're all looking for a formula that is, once you can kind of crack it, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily guaranteed to get that grant, but there is, you do have to like kind of, I don't know, go along with this formula, and it unfortunately is, it's a very long and arduous, sort of uh, monotonous task. But I started just asking some friends of mine, and the main thing that everyone was saying, and actually the granting officers as well, will talk to you on the phone and they'll like guide you through your grants. So everyone's sort of, the number one tip that I would have, or that I was given, was that you want your grant to really tell a story. Like you can't just sort of ask for something, and you really need to answer the who, what, where, why now, why this money, how much you really have to be employing your artists at a union rate. And there's certain things you just have to just narratively communicate to the granting bodies. So that's, while also sort of, you know repeating yourself a lot, because a lot of the questions are very repetitive.
Fair.
So yeah.
Now, with that though, so what was that learning process like? So you'd submit grants, and then I guess when you get a no, what could you take from those no's and then apply it to your next grants?
Well, actually, we've had one of the great things about the Canada Council right now, and different granting bodies at different times, obviously depending on the political party in power. But sometimes they're more money for the arts, obviously. And then, also in tandem with being more money for the arts, sometimes there's more help on the actual council side to actually, guide you through the process. So one of the notes we got, I actually was very lucky. My first grant I got awarded, and I was, but it was for a really strong show that really should have been staged. So
Hmm.
that, you know, whether it was my grant writing or it was the show and the people involved and the artists involved, I don't know. But we have had many no's, many no's. And a couple of things I've taken away from them. One time we were trying to do a show that would have been a profit share for the artists, so they wouldn't have been paid equity rates up front, and we would have shared the profits of the ticket sales. And we were denied that grant. And when we went back to them, and this was earlier in our like my theater company, the Howland Company, has been around for 8 years now, but this was early days. And they said, like, you didn't get the grant because you weren't paying your artists enough. And now we were the artists. Like, it was also us. So we took from that, like, we certainly weren't finding other artists to exploit. We were exploiting ourselves. But that was a really quick lesson of, like, no, like, you need to advocate for yourself, and you know, in spirit, but also in practice. Like, you're not eligible for funding if you're not paying artists a living wage. And if you are those artists, then you are those artists. But so that was one. And actually, we just had a grant come through. Oh my gosh, I'm such a grant nerd today. But we just had a grant come through that this is the second time this has happened, but you can be denied a grant, and then, you know, a year later, once they've handed out and awarded all the money, there might be leftover money, or a company may have turned down a grant because it conflicted with maybe another grant they had. So we just got a little grant that we had already been rejected from. And so with that, my lesson is just friggin' apply, because you never know. You might get a no, and then maybe at the end of the line, there's more money than they thought, or more money is pumped. I don't know. In this case, it might be more money's been pumped into theater because of how decimating the last 2 years for theater has been. I don't know, but we got this grant and we're very excited. It was a surprise.
That is fascinating. I had no idea that was like that people would turn down grants as well. So that's interesting to know, because that's definitely been a world that I've wanted to delve into, but I'm just daunted by the task itself.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm also just not willing to add more rejection on my plate. I don't know.
That's fair too. But the task itself is very daunting, but I would suggest to anyone that wants to write grants, like, just call the granting body and just ask the stupidest questions, because I did. And, like, oftentimes I would be like, what is the difference between this word salad of a question and the one before it? And they would be like, I mean, honestly, they're not that different. So just keep writing, like, just really keep putting them out there. But yeah, it's a weird one.
It's fascinating how you phrased it too, where it's like you have to tell them a story. And I never thought of it in that perspective, where it's like, okay, cool, I write scripts, I write little, you know, excerpts here and there. But then when I think grant writing, I think of English class and all the errors that would get marked down. So it's like, how do you balance it from storytelling to being grammatically correct?
I think and listen, I have dyslexia and I have ADHD, so I know all about grammatically incorrect and spelling mistakes and, like, the world I live in. But I think, like, it just becomes the thing is, your project and the people you're working with, like, there needs to be within you that urgency for this to be made. You know, it's not a place for, oh, like, this would be kind of cool maybe. it's a place for like, I think these artists need to be seen. I think this story needs to be told. I think that this will improve Toronto or Ontario or Canada in this way. And I, for the grants that I write, like, and I don't write grants for other people or for other theater companies because I just don't have the passion for, like, if I have a project and I really, really, really need money to make it, to employ the fantastic artists I think should be in this project, then I think urgency and narrative a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that helps for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I think you've reignited my I wouldn't say it's a passion yet, but the task of needing to dive into that.
And even like questions about like marketing and like who's this for, like that's all, as artists, it really also forces you to examine and really articulate why you want to make something, and who it is for. And like they sound sort of like dull business questions, but they're not. They're asking you, why should this be on stage now? Or why should this be a film now?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to see this? How are you going to reach those people? And I think it's at the end of the day, I love grants, but today, listen, I do not.
Hear that. Fair enough. You brought up an interesting point that I kind of want to also now explore, where you talk about being artists and that phase where it's like you do it for free. So money really isn't the main drive to pursuing it. What's then your opinion on when an artist, like I personally feel like an artist shouldn't stop doing free work, but there is the reality of, in order to maintain this level of service that we're providing, we need to get paid so that everybody else that's starting off, they then will also get the opportunity to get paid and stop having to do free work. Because like it's true where it's like, if it's a passion project and it's not about the money for you, the reality is if you take that job and opt not to get paid, it kind of is detrimental to the up and coming artists that are trying to get paid work. So then what's the transitional point then for an artist, for them to buckle down and say, no, I'm only going to do paid work?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it isn't always, that answer is always in flux. Because sometimes if I've had a great year and I've done some TV and some films, I'll do more free work because I have the income to do it. And I either will help a friend with a short film, or I'll do a reading for somebody that I really think would be amazing to work with. But
I guess let me rephrase that question, because you said if you've had a good year. So excluding that aspect of having that good year, where, because like, yes, if you've had a great year, and I second that notion of like, stop being greedy and dive into something that can help somebody else, and not make it about money. But then when it's you're starting off and you're doing all free work because you need a demo reel, you need more experience, you need to build connections in that part of everybody's acting journey, when then would you say you have to stop that until you get to a point that you're on a TV show and then you can do it again?
That is tough. that's a tough one, because
Hmm.
I believe so wholeheartedly in that acting is a practice. So stopping anything in protest of not being paid is, if you haven't reached a point of your career that you can do that with comfort,
Hmm.
um, I then that question becomes more for me, how long do you want to stay in the industry? And I only mean that, and listen, I've been through that question time and time again myself, and I did not have an easy start. I was not someone who booked right out of school. I was not someone who booked 5 years after that either. But I certainly not on a consistent basis.
Hmm.
But within that time, I built my theater company. I did a lot of my own work, and then my own work, which I did do largely for free, eventually, landed me. I was starring in a show that my theater company produced, and the casting director for a TV show came to see it, and that was my first. I booked that show and was on it for 4 years, and that was my first big show. So that all came from that sort of entrepreneurial artist and making your own work, which came in large part from my unpaid hours and subsidized by Joe jobs. But because for me, like, I like to improvise, I like to write, I like to act. I don't always, during the pandemic, you can't really do any of that on your own. So, for me, like, I'll do an improv show. I would, if I wasn't where I am in my career, I would have either left this career, or I would still be doing improv for free, community
Hmm.
theater, like other stuff, because it's a practice. And sitting at home for me in protest of not being paid would have absolutely lessened my skill set, because I'm not interacting, I'm not playing around, I'm not growing as an actor if I'm in protest in that way.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that make
No,
sense?
fair. It does. It does. Because I've had that conversation with multiple artists, and it's the responses are always varying, but
Sure.
then it's rare that I'll come across an artist that'll say, I'll never do free work. And every now and then I'll do come across that, but then hearing their story and why they choose not to do free work makes complete sense.
Totally.
But then it's just like, I'll talk to the up and coming artist, and they're just beside themselves because they know it's about the art and it's about the love for the art. And they're like, I just need to get paid, and I gotta have this Joe job, and then it's just eating at them, and it's unfortunate. Um,
But I think I would argue, and I think certainly I know my drawbacks as an actor, and I have to um it is a practice for me, but for others it's not. Some
yeah,
people are just magnetic always and immediately, with um no nurturing of that practice. um I am not, and most of the up and comers that I come across are not either. Like, and so I think, if it wasn't like, it would be like, to me it would be like, if I was a personal trainer and then I was like, well, I'm not gonna work out until I'm paid, you would then become flabby, and now you're not up to you're not up to date with the latest personal training trends, or you're not in practice of it, and it's now um, you're not as sharp as you need to be.
yeah, yeah. I my analogy that I use is more like a mental mindset of you get paid for the work, but then people associate the work as being on set. where I associate the work with auditions. You don't get paid for auditions.
100%.
And so it's like you have to be about the work, and
Yeah.
that work is unpaid.
Yeah.
And so, because I find, I don't know how you feel, but when I find I'm on set, um, the job is so much easier
Yeah.
because you have the writer, you have the director, you can ask questions. But then when you're
Yeah.
doing your auditions, you have nobody really to ask questions. This is your time to do the work and make the choice. It's up to you. That's your work. It is just to make the choice.
Especially now with this like entirely self-tape culture.
Mm,
Like recently I've been writing with my tapes, just being like, if they have like a note, like when we used to go in the room, like, I don't know, at least half the time the casting director would be like, oh, you got that like wrong, Ruth.
yeah.
Like take it again. But this is sorry, you think you're in a horror movie and this is a Christmas rom-com. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and when you're going off the like, 7-page hint at what the story is, it's very easy to, not necessarily get the tone, especially some of these really top secret freaking, you're
Yeah.
just kind of playing detective. And sorry, that's my that's my audition tangent. But I take your point about auditions are absolutely the work. And the reason in my mind, when you're paid handsomely on a show, that's your annual income, which includes the audition periods. In the
Yeah.
same way, a company that pitches, any company that creates pitch decks for free,
Yeah.
then lands the client, and then their full year is inclusive of both of those things.
I equate the salary to, when you're like watching court dramas, or if you've ever been in a court and you witness it and they add on the surplus amount of pain and suffering. That's what I equate to what we get, where it's like it's your annual salary plus the pain and suffering for the last however many years you were studying this art.
Totally. Totally.
um, so
Yeah.
about now your theater company. I'm so excited to dive into this because what made you want to do it? And I have to say, like, your theater company is incredible with the work that you put out and with the talent that you decide to cast for these productions. They're incredible. So, what made you want to go down that route of making it official and creating the Howland Theatre Company?
Yeah. So yeah, we created the Howland Company in 2014. Um, and we were just at the time we were not, well, my friend and I were not working. um, the Howland Company is made up of 9 members, and we have what we call a collective leadership model. So we don't have an artistic director. We don't have any sort of CEO or anything, but we have 9 equal voices. And when we started, it started with my friend James and I, and we both just had a love of theater. We did theater in high school together. That's how I met him. And we were tired of not working, but also feeling very isolated in the early audition process that is an actor's life. You go to theater school or you take drama, and you do a play. That's why you want to do this, and then you get an agent, and then unless you book something right away, you spend a year just prepping auditions in isolation and coming to auditions, seeing some scary faces you're going up against and some scary producers, and then going home. It can be so isolating at the beginning, and you really have to build a community. So that we started based around this thing called the reading group, which it was a monthly play reading group that we just had. There was about 10 of us at the time, and we just read a play monthly. But then we sort of decided to form a company. We applied to the Fringe Festival and got in. And so sort of in 2 years, we had our first show, and this now monthly group, the reading group, which we have now run for 8 years,
Wow.
and really took on like a real new importance during the pandemic. I mean, we've run them every last Monday of the month for 8 years, and then we had to stop, obviously, in March 2020, but we moved them to Zoom, and suddenly, like all over again, we were seeing, you know, a huge uptick of participants and just like actors and theater lovers from the community in Toronto. So really building that community, that was something I was very proud of, you know, almost a decade later, that like that community really was built and was there for people during the pandemic. So that's how it started. And then, yeah, we did a play, and we won Best of Fringe from that first show. And then we just, I don't know, we just kept going. The whole thing with the company is that we all come from different places. So there was people from Soul Pepper Theater. I come mostly from film and television, people from, you know, theater in Chicago. Then there was like, we had some new Ryerson students, we just all came from different type backgrounds, and so we all bring very different perspectives to our work, and as a result, our plays are very varied.
Have you ever put on or mounted a play that you guys wrote yourselves?
Yeah, so
okay.
Our most recent production, which happened, that was, we had one show close February of 2020, thank God, like right before everything shut down.
Yeah.
And that was called Casimir and Caroline, and it was an adaptation of a German play that was written in the 1800s. So we've done translations and adaptations, and we're working on another one right now, but they're very much they're very adapted, like they're very far from the original script. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then
I'd love to write that.
Yeah, because I just see creativity when I see you putting on work, and that's always one thing that like I always wonder, where it's like, oh, when are they gonna do like a Ruth Goodwin original, you know what I mean, where it's just with that, where how this is presumptuous of me, but I think that you would be in this bubble as well, where it's like, how many scripts do you have that you've written that's just sitting on your desktop?
Well, yeah, I would definitely be in this boat. I'm trying to make a TV show right now. Trying being the operative word, but I have really always wanted to be a showrunner in my like long-term career goals, and so I have a bunch of pilots, and I really like spent a lot of time trying to like learn the pilot format, and especially like the half-hour comedy pilot format, which is very specific, and you know, you really need to know the rules to be able to like improvise around the rules, and you know them to break them, I guess. But it's so funny because then during the pandemic, I was like mourning the loss of theater, like so much. Like as soon as we couldn't do it, I was like gutted. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take a playwriting class. I'm just going to write a play. And I would have written probably 5 pilots. And for the life of me, I could not write a play. I couldn't write a play. I don't know why. And like in my head, I was like, when you write a TV pilot, you just send it to networks and producers and, you know, people that it just goes into an ether. Whereas like if I were to, what I have to move beyond, but like to write a play, I would know that it would play with the Howland Company. and they would read it and either immediately reject it, all my friends, or it would get past that point and it would make it to production. And then I would like see the audiences right in front of me. It's something that is so, it was such a mental block for me, just knowing the theater community in Toronto and knowing who would, being able to be like, oh, and this person will come and this person will review it and this person will hate it and this person, and that I have to, I don't know, go to therapy and figure out how to move past that, because I really would love to write a play and I have lots of TV scripts I can write, but I just haven't, I can't get past that part.
That's an interesting block. I've never encountered that where it's like, it just sounds like you're just scared of the audience.
Well, you know how like sometimes people say like, oh, I could, you know, I could sing or I could perform to like 150 people, but it was just like my 5 friends. I'm like so awkward. Do you know that feeling at all?
Interesting. Yeah.
Feels like that to me. Like I'm like, oh, I could like send, you know, my ego is inflated enough that I could just send this to a production company and think, oh, this should be made. But then like for actually like something like what I would just stand on stage and say my own lines and have people look at me and judge me, that's scary.
That's funny. So you mentioned taking a playwriting class. So
Yeah.
that's a great segue then now for inquiring about your training. Because I've seen your work and you're phenomenal in every aspect of it, where you bring so much skill to the craft. Where did you learn to act?
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna be so upset if you said I've never trained in my life.
No, I didn't go to
Okay.
theater school. I went to school and got like a general arts degree, which is, it was still in drama, but it was more in like theater history than like us actually like acting. So I had to like really train after school,
Hmm.
after college. But I honestly, I had an amazing on-camera teacher, Salvatore Antonio, at in Toronto at the Armstrong Actors Studio. So that was a big. He was very hard on me and very. I won a scholarship to that studio for a year, so it was like a godsend of on-camera acting for a year. But he really. I have ADHD, and until I worked with him, I had no real sense outside of like, oh, I have, you know, when I was in high school, I had extra time on tests and I had, you know, outside of academically, I knew what ADHD was, but he was like, you have a focusing problem. And when you come to class focused, you are great. And and the other 50% of the time, you are so scattered and talking to people and not, and he's like, and this alludes to my thing about the type of actor I know that I am, but he was like, you are not one of those actors that can just like be on your phone or talk to somebody next to you and then like be in the moment. Like you are not that. And
Fair.
there are many actors who are, and it's
Yeah.
such a superpower. I wish I had it. He was like, you need to like do your mindfulness before you come to class and like get yourself in a focused place if you really want to pursue this. So that was like I left that conversation sobbing, but ultimately he was right. And I started applying like more of my ADHD, you know, tips and survival hacks to my craft. So that was part of it. And then honestly, when we started the Howland Company, we taught each other how to act. Like we had some members who were farther along in their careers than others, much farther along than me. And they directed me and they were like, what are you doing? Like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
So no, I think, and then just getting to, and then it just grew from there. But I've mostly learned to act from directors and on camera acting teachers.
Fair. Um, I think the thing that sets you apart for me in the Toronto acting community is you found a way to really mesh and incorporate drama and comedy. Um,
Thank you.
I don't know if it's a skewed perspective, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, but I feel like the Toronto entertainment scene, when it comes to film and TV, comedy and drama are very separate. You have your comedic actors and then you have your dramatic actors, and it's very rare that you'll see a Canadian actor cover both of them.
Yeah.
So with that, you where did you envision yourself when you first started acting? Did you think you were going to be into comedy, or did you think you were going to be into drama? And then what was the process, or how did you find out that you were so able and ready to do both?
Um, I never thought I would be that into drama. Um, I really wanted to do musicals, to be honest, when I first
Mm.
started out, and then started going to auditions with all the like Sheridan College, like real musical theater, um, achieving kids. That's sort of I sort of stopped pursuing that. And then, but in that sort of musical love, I was like comedy was very much a part of that. And one of my best friends growing up is a phenomenal improviser, Liz Johnston. And she really exposed me to a lot of the comedy bars, comedy scene, like from the time that we were like in grade 8 and continues to. So that really, that part of my life was very I was always observing of the comedy community, and then I don't know, I did but Howland again is like they just started putting me in some dramatic roles, and I remember I did this show Punk Rock where it was a very very dramatic piece, and I was like sort of this central character that a lot of chaos happened around, and I was terrified. Like I was like, oh, I can only really like mug my face, and like I don't really know why I'm in this part. um but our director was really believed in me and just like really helped me to do less on stage and just like, you know, live in that truthful moment. And I think that was a huge help. And um now I really like them both, and I think they both serve each other very well. I don't think in my own personal experience, I've just had a death in my life, and I don't think I've laughed harder than I did at some of the stuff that happened in the memorial service, because you're just so
Mm.
heightened. I don't think there is drama without comedy, and I don't think there's comedy without drama. So the more advanced I get in this world, I think that they both have a really strong, truthful place in each other. And I pause at dramatic performances now that have absolutely no humor in them.
Mm.
I don't know how believable I find that. Yeah.
I have a strong sentiment of a really strong comedic actor can absolutely do a dramatic role justice, but a
Totally.
really strong dramatic actor is going to have a hard time with comedy.
Yeah.
What's your sentiment with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely would agree about a comedic actor in drama. Although it's funny, like it is funny how sometimes comedians will go, "Oh, I'm just a comedian. I'm not an actor." And actors will go, "Oh, I'm just an actor. I'm not a comedian." And how quick we are to apologize for if we we're to label ourselves. And I mean, we're all storytellers, like we're all friggin' doing this, like but yeah, dramatic actors, I think with the right direction though, like someone that really takes themselves so seriously is just going to be funny, like if you have the right director behind you. But no, I don't think I think I don't think a dramatic actor could just jump up in an improv and just go for it necessarily as easy as their father's on stage.
Yeah, no, it's because I think like it's the comedic timing I find is where dramatic actors struggle, where because that was my experience starting off, where I was just learning how to get invested in these characters that I was breaking down and building a backstory and asking these pertinent questions to bring out the emotion. And I had absolutely zero concept of comedy and timing and repetition. And I think that's the big separation, where that's life, is just allowing yourself to understand your impulses, where in drama you're just very in your head and you're more ruminating on these questions versus allowing yourself to just feel and to act and to just go. So it's one thing that I always try to steer beginner actors in when they ask for tips, where it's like, all right, make sure you dive into some improv classes as well as whatever drama you're studying. But yeah, no, that's always been an interesting thing. So it's like when I see somebody with strong comedic chops and brilliant presence when it comes to those intense dramatic scenes, like it's definitely something to not just glance over.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, with your theater company as well, and with all the opportunities that you've kind of provided yourself with, also the other members in that cast, do you ever have a thought of this is going to lead to something? I guess throughout an entire career of acting, like, what was that emotion like, trying to get over the fact that it's okay that this might not lead to anything, even though you invest everything in it and you hope that, oh, there's going to be a representative or an agent from CAA in the audience tonight, and they're going to definitely, pick one of us up. But then it's like, how did you come across to being okay with, and I don't even know if you are okay with it, and if there's still that little voice inside you, but like, how did you come across with, the reason why I say that you're okay with it is because you're still here and you're still doing it. So there's a level of okay that I think I can safely say is there. But how did you navigate being okay with thinking something's going to happen and then it doesn't?
Oh, am I okay with it now? I think there's two things. I really struggle when something doesn't build to anything. I really, maybe I'm opportunistic in that way. I really struggle with it. And that can be, that doesn't need to be like, I do this show and I end up on a TV show. I do this play and I end up on a TV show, or I do this TV show and I end up on a movie, or it doesn't need to be that, but it can be, this really landed with somebody, or this really, or somebody saw this and will think of me for some other role. But yeah, I have to say I do struggle with that. That being said, you know, in the auditioning process, that's a constant. And just sort of inventing these 3-dimensional people on 48 hours notice and then putting them on camera in your Sunday best and then not hearing anything is hard. For me, I just have to pick and choose like what I care the most about. And sometimes that means I let myself really want an audition maybe once or twice a month and to mourn when I don't get it. And that is like just, you know, by mourn, I mean like, you know, take the hit, feel sad about it, you know, 12 hours later, sleep on it, and then I'm back the next day. Other than like that, I couldn't tell you what I auditioned for last week, and I did 4 auditions last week, and they were all long. And I could not tell you what they were today. Like they just go like right out of my head. Because I can't keep them in my head or I will go crazy.
Yeah. With that process of letting go of those auditions, was it always like that for you? Or what was your journey from being able to, yeah, because like it's I feel like every actor, doesn't matter who you are, you're going to experience all the same steps as every actor, every artist that dives into this industry, where
Yeah.
you'll need to learn to let go is one big one.
Yeah.
You'll need to understand that, like I brought up with the previous question, where not everything is stepping stones, and how you mentioned where it's like it's not play then TV then movie, like it varies, and the different levels of rejection where I broke that down with another friend too, where it's like every actor, no matter how much you prep them, they're all going to face the first time they're cut out of a scene. They're all going to face the first time they're going to get recast. They're all going to face the first time their lines get cut. And every actor has to go through that process to kind of callous themselves in this industry. So, what was that experience like for you, being able to understand that, okay, once the audition is done, I need to get it out of my head?
Mm. Yeah. I wonder what that was. I feel like I've blacked out that period. Like what was that? Like I have flashes of like,
I remember
yeah, I don't know. I think
when I was starting off, like I'd remember an audition I would have, and I could recite it to you like 2 months later because that's how invested I was.
yeah.
And then there was still also that little voice in my head saying, well, maybe they haven't cast it and I'm still an option, so I still need to know this.
Yes.
And then it was like getting to the point of just realizing that, okay, once they do the audition, once they get all the lines out, and then back to what we were starting off earlier, it's like, that's the work. I did the work. I don't need to take the work home with me now. And then I started practicing that by throwing out my sides after I left the audition.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people, I've heard of that. And I heard that and I was like, for a really long time, it was like, I didn't have a printer and it was actually like such a pain for me to print my sides. And so I never threw them out because I was like, and I would get these callbacks and I was like, this is like what also for anyone that is listening that doesn't do this, what heightens this entire process is that it happens in 48 hours. If we were given a week to prep these auditions, it would be very different. But you get 48 to, 48 hours if you're lucky to turn over these like, leading dream roles that any human would want all the time in the world to produce, and you get no time. So everything is like so fast, which also allows me to forget faster. But I never saved my sides because I was like, oh my gosh, to go back to the print shop, if I'm getting called back for this, is like an hour out of those 48 hours that I don't have. But I think what really did it for me, honestly, was being more entrepreneurial in other parts of my career. Because I just I have so many irons in the fire at any given time. Like when I booked my first major show, I was like, I didn't have time for it. I had spent like, years waiting to book something, getting very, very close for a very, very long time, which is like a whole other slog and like impossible to keep an income in that period of time, because again, 48 hours you're being called back for things and you're never making any money. But so I had spent a long time in that period, and then I booked this thing. But by the time I booked it, I had shows lined up that I was producing. I had like through to the end of the year. So I ended up, and that was a really big lesson for me, just in terms of like I was working all the time. So my acting was better objectively. Like it was constantly the tool was constantly being exercised. And then it didn't mean so much to me at that point because I had my own things going on, and I'm in a bit of that phase again right now. I'm getting inundated with a lot of things, which are great, but I have a lot of things of my own that are keeping me going. So it creates a more holistic experience for me than just waiting for the phone to ring, which when I have had to do that, like during the lockdown, I mean, it's just painful, and it adds a desperation to your work, to my work at least, that is just, doesn't serve in any way. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally.
So I think I just know I have to forget these things.
Fair.
Yeah.
One thing too that I want to explore is whenever an artist gets so busy, and especially when it's like in the early parts of their career, and they have a lot going on, and there tends to be a moment that they kind of lose themselves in all of that work.
Yeah.
Then with that, it ultimately leads to some kind of crash in the form of depression. And I'm curious if you're willing to share, what was those low times like, and how did you get out of them?
Yeah, I've definitely, burnout is something I have like very much, I sort of thought was a myth until I experienced it. And just like burnout by sort of definition being like, the things that once brought you joy, like you get no joy from, like you're just exhausted all the time. And I would say like some of the like highest points of my career on paper, in that I'm the most booked and I'm working on things that I love, I have also been totally burnt out and out of ideas to bring to set, and out of energy to explore anything, and very anxious. And if you don't have your mental health in a good place, I think a set is like a very hierarchical ecosystem with a high likelihood of toxicity, just in terms of like how much money is being spent per minute and how high stakes everyone's job is, and how or they feel their job is, and how worried everyone is about your mental health in a good spot when you get there. For me, I can just absorb all of that. Like from the minute I step in hair and makeup, if there's like on the walkies or complaints between just in the trailers, already I'm like, oh my God, I'm taking on everyone's frustration, which is making it harder for me to do my job, which is like to be a secretary in the 1950s and not sitting in this trailer in 2021. Like, so it's so for me, mindfulness, yoga, like all that sort of prep, mental health prep stuff. I try not to drink too much in the weeks leading up to like a big gig, or, just try to not, not that I drink, not that I'm a lush, but I just try to, be in a healthier place internally and externally to get through those periods.
Yeah. What's something then you would advise up and coming artists into this craft then to help them, I guess, I don't want to use the word slow down, because I feel like when we first dive into this industry, we have that concept and understanding of we got to go full throttle and hope for the best. But the reality is there has to be some kind of slow burn as well. So in terms of, I guess, a rest and relaxation reset period, what's some advice that you would give somebody starting into this industry?
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard. I think often about this because what would I tell my younger self? Like, to work not as hard? Like, I wouldn't have had this success that I had then, which is terrible. But, we have to be mindful of our mental health. We also have to go after what we want in a responsible way. But sometimes, when you're younger and you have more energy and you don't have kids and you don't have, maybe a spouse, and things are only going to it's only going to be harder for you as you get older to really grind. So when you're starting out, like, if you really want it, it's going to be a grind when you get to the professional level. So start grinding before that, so you're ready, because unless the industry makes some leaps and bound changes, which it should, but it's not anytime soon, I think work hard and develop a mindfulness practice and be self-aware, and don't, work smart. Like, you have to, memorizing lines over and over and over and over again for an audition tomorrow is not necessarily the work you need to be doing. If you don't know the who, what, where, when, why of this character and who you're talking to and the stakes, and where are you on the moon? Are you in a are you in the middle of a high stakes surgery, or are you at a coffee shop? Like, if you can't answer those questions.
Funny that you ask those questions, like that, but it's like all those three things could be the scenario. You're in a coffee shop doing a high stakes surgery on the moon.
No, literally. And sometimes I find that some younger actors can kind of miss those points and kind of busy syndrome themselves with, just memorizing lines. you have to really learn what works for you to truthfully tell a story, and then, repeat that and really hone that. And only you can really answer that. But it will, when you are smarter about your work, it comes easier, and it doesn't, like, I used to just memorize and then freak out for an audition, and everyone in my life would suffer, like my partner, my parents, like I would be so anxious until I learned how to actually have a practice of, all of acting,
Yeah.
which includes some mindfulness, some yoga, some like very meticulous prep, some internal exploration, then, some practical learning of the lines. Like that's, I don't know. Did that answer your question? I just went on such a
Slightly.
rant.
Yeah, but having your own practice and making things easier. But then as well as like, how do you, or what's your advice for the rest period and stepping away
Oh,
from,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have a rest period. I think you also need to have things that you do that aren't related to this industry. You need to have hobbies. You need to have, when I was starting out, I didn't really feel I had the luxury of like clocking out or going away or really like resting, both because I didn't have the money to go away, but I also didn't have like it felt to me like I was always on call to audition. But within that, I have hobbies, I have, things that I like to do that turn my brain off. And to me, that was the rest period at the beginning. Other people taking a good month or two away would probably be good. But when you're starting out, you don't know what you're going to miss. My worry. I'm an anxious
Yeah.
actor, so.
No, that's fair. That's like, I think you still hit it on the head, where everybody kind of needs to figure out their own process and what their rest period itself looks like. Um, yeah, it's such a fickle industry, where pretty much my hope with this podcast and people that do decide to tune in and listen is that they get that message of, these are the things that you're going to face, so just get ready for it. Like as you mentioned, where it's like
Yeah.
the burnout. A lot of people, I remember when I was starting off too, where they didn't believe in burnout. I didn't believe in burnout, especially. And I experienced my first burnout that like completely changed my life, is like after a 17-hour day of working, I fell asleep at the wheel driving home. And so I was like,
God.
that was like one of the, oh, I'm not
Yeah.
Superman. I do need rest.
Yeah.
And it's one of those unfortunate things where it's like, you have to learn it the hard way. Just like, as I mentioned, where it's like,
Yeah.
it's one of the things that if you're going to experience when your first scene gets cut. And it's like, I think the reason
Yeah.
why that hurts so many actors at like the early stages is because they're so excited about that scene. And then they reach out to everybody to tell everybody, like, hey, tune in, tune in. And then when you don't show up, it's more of like a real ego punch. But yeah, rest and
And I
relaxation
think,
is,
oh yeah. And just like, I guess what I'm sort of getting at is just building a stamina and being able to recognize when you're in one phase or another phase. Because sometimes, when you're not working, you're auditioning, you're building a stamina for that. And
mm,
that really, in my experience, doesn't allow you a vacation,
mm,
because you can go away, but you can still be self-tape when you're away, and then you're not really away, you're still
yeah,
in it.
yeah,
But then when you're on set, and you're working on something, you know, a lot of actors will make the mistake of continuing to audition for major things when they're in a key position on a lead thing. And I don't know if that's a mistake, but some people, you know, you have, at that point, you know yourself, can you do it or can you not do it? And if you can't do it, well, don't jeopardize the job you're on.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a really crucial lesson.
And then, you know, if you get a great job, then yeah, you can afford a vacation. And, you know, your stamina might be a little bit less because the hours are insane, but you'll get a break at the end of it. But yeah,
Fair.
That's my.
No, that definitely makes so much sense.
I heard
But Ruth, thank you so much for your time and your expertise on everything. But before I do let you go, I do have one aching question that I was burning to ask you, just because you have your own theater company, and I think that you would have the answer to this. So hopefully you do. But Cirque du Soleil and wrestling, like WWE wrestling,
Yeah.
are those equity?
This is a good question. I bet you Cirque du Soleil is. I thought there was like something about wrestling that was I thought there was some exposing of, now forgive me, like wrestling, that's like the more theatrical one, right?
Yeah,
there's like
yeah.
boxing, which is like an sport, and then
No,
there's like
not boxing or UFC. I'm talking like wrestling, WWF, where there'd be moments that they'd have a microphone and they'd be sticking to a script, and that, like, I see that, and they're getting paid handsomely.
Yes, but I thought there was something that I had actually heard about, which was that WWF wrestling, at least until very recently, but if not still, that they are the closest to the old Hollywood studio system, in that like they own your likeness and they just contract you over and over again for different, I don't know, fights,
Interesting.
shows.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something that wrestlers talk a lot about, is like, I don't even own my name.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm making this up.
No, that's true. But like,
but Cirque du Soleil, I think, is.
So with that though, it's like you have, for example, there was a big debacle with the Power Rangers where they weren't getting paid their royalties for their merchandise, because when their merchandise was being sold, it was being sold with the helmet. So it didn't have your likeness. It was the likeness of the studio. But the Power Rangers were still union. They were, you know, SAG-AFTRA. So it's like whenever I watch wrestling and I think of wrestling, I'm like, are they equity? Are they part of the union? Because this is still technically a staged performance.
Yeah, and it's filmed too. But I feel like they're not. I feel like I've heard that they are not best treated, but I'm not sure. I feel like I read that in the news, and maybe I'm wrong. So don't quote me on that. But I'm sure
I was hoping you would have the answers for me on this.
Televised. I know. I wish I did too. That's a Google though, for sure. But there's something about the televised component of it. Like, there's no way equity represents them. No, maybe
SAG. Maybe. Interesting. So then now with that, like, my follow-up question is like, what then is the hierarchy? Like how you explain, where it was like, get into a movie or get into plays and then TVs and then movies, where it's like, where does wrestling fall into that? Because they're artists. I'll call them artists. Those wrestlers, they're getting paid way more than a lot of, you know, people in theater. And it's just like, where, so does that mean they're higher? Is that why The Rock and, other wrestlers transition into the film industry? And it's just been a dying question in my
Well,
block.
they're making more than people in theater because there's millions of people watching them because they're televised. That's why they're making more than people in theater.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a hierarchy even within the wrestlers. Like some are newer and
Yeah.
get paid way less. And I do think, now I'm just like an expert on something I know nothing about, but I feel like I read an article about this or something, but I think like when you consider what they have to do to their bodies, they are actually not as handsomely paid as like what they're doing to their bodies is more akin to football players, and they're certainly not as well paid as football players.
Yeah.
But I think that is part of it. Wow, suddenly I'm starting a protest for the wrestlers.
Equality and equity for wrestlers. No, I'm with it. I'll march to that.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm just a big advocate for mental health, and like the documentaries and especially the things that hit the news where wrestlers have to deal with like their mental health is very poorly treated, and it's sad. And I definitely hope that attention gets sent that way. But again, Ruth, thank you so much for your time, and you are amazing. And I cannot wait to see another Howland Company play because you guys just absolutely rock whatever stage you guys touch. So congratulations again with that.
Well, thank you so much. This was great to talk to you.
Likewise. But everybody, thank y'all for tuning in to the 2 Degrees podcast brought to you by the Play On Foundation. Ruth Goodwin, check her out, check out her works, follow her on Instagram and see what she's up to. But if you ever get a chance and you are in Toronto and there is a play happening, do check it out. And I guarantee you are going to be thoroughly entertained. But other than that, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and mag-ingat kayo.